Hey guys, it's Genevieve, and in this video we are going to learn how to draw a watercolor succulent in Procreate. In this tutorial I'm using the Ultimate Watercolor Toolbox, which has some watercolor brushes as well as a pre-textured watercolor file. If you're interested in checking it out, I'll link it in the description below, but otherwise you can still follow the tutorial with different brushes. You're just going to get a result that is not necessarily watercolor looking. Okay, let's jump in. So the first thing we are going to do is we are going to sketch the succulent. So go ahead and create a new layer for that. And pick a nice dark green, as well as a brush that you know you like sketching with. If you have the watercolor toolbox, pick the coloring pencil. That's what I would recommend. Okay, the thing with succulents is they kind of have groups of leaves that are layered. And when you kind of think about the shape that way, it makes it way easier. Otherwise, it just looks kind of intimidating because there's so much going on. And so we're going to draw the first group of leaves, which is the one in the center. And they are not really fully leaves yet. They're just starting to bloom, would not be the right word, but they're just starting to develop. So draw this weird sort of egg shape, and then split it right down the middle. And the bottom part, you split it in the middle too. You can round the corners a little bit if you want to, but it's not a big deal, it's just a sketch. And now that we have the center part, we're just going to add more and more and more leaves around it. So starting from the middle of one of the leaves, just draw a curve that goes to the middle of the other one. And then repeat, and repeat. So that's the second group of leaves. They're a bit more developed than the first one, but they're still not fully leaves yet. So go ahead and do that again. So starting from the center of one leaf to the center of the other, just like that. And again, and every time you see your leaves are just starting to become a bit bigger and a bit more pointy. And you can leave a bit more gap between them here as well. So center, kind of. And at this point, you're just trying to fill in the gaps, basically. So it's a game of seeing, where you feel like a leaf would look good, and then adding it, and seeing where you need to balance it out by adding one somewhere else. And we're drawing a plant, so it doesn't have to be perfect, because in real life it wouldn't be perfect, and actually it would look really weird if it was super symmetrical. So you want to have something that is a bit funky and a bit organic. Cool. If your shape is in a weird place on your canvas, that's totally possible. Just go ahead and grab the arrow here and move it towards the center so we are just ready to go. And that's going to be the sketch layer, so go ahead and double click on it and just click on rename and name it sketch or something that you're going to remember, because we don't want to mix it up with the other ones. Because the next step we're going to do is we're going to color in all the different groups of leaves on separate layers. And so we just want to make sure that we're not drawing on this sketch layer. So go ahead and create a new layer and drag and drop it below the sketch layer. And select the main color that you want for your succulent. So make it something that is not too light, but not too dark, just kind of in the middle, and is fairly saturated. And you can pick either green or yellow or even a blue, purple color, because succulents come in so many different variations. And for this, we're going to use the inking brush that comes with Procreate, because you want something that doesn't have any texture to it. You want something that is fully just like a solid color. So I like this one. And again, making sure we are on a separate layer that we just created, we are going to zoom in a little bit and just quickly outline the first group of 3 leaves that we drew here. And we are going to fill in this outline by holding our pencil in the color and then drag it in on here. And you see it just fills in the color. We're going to create a new layer, drag it below the one that we just drew the first group on, and then sketch the outline of the second group of leaves. Again, it doesn't need to be precise. The only thing you need to care about is that it's just one continuous line that connects. Otherwise, when you go and fill in the color, it's just going to fill in the entire canvas. So we're going to repeat this for every group of leaf. So just create a new layer, drag it below the other one or the previous one, and then fill the color in. Awesome. Now we can go ahead and hide the sketch layer that we created first. We don't want to delete it, we just want to hide it. So click on the check mark here. And at this point, you're probably thinking, Genevieve, why do we have to draw on all the leaves on separate layers? Because right now it just looks like one big blob. I'm with you here, but bear with me. You know succulents, if you have one at home or if you Google it, you're going to see that the leaves have really lighter edges, and then that it comes closer to center, it's just darker and more saturated. So we're going to recreate this effect really quickly. So go ahead and click twice on the first layer, which is going to open the layer options here, and tap on select. It's going to select all only the color that is on that specific layer. But what we want to do this trick is we want everything but the color. So we're going to invert the selection here. We are also going to feather it a little bit, somewhere between 10 and 20, I would say. Then going here in the adjustment panel, go ahead and select hue, saturation, and brightness, and crank up the brightness, crank up the saturation, and maybe move the hue to be a bit more yellow too. And see if we deselect, we can see that we now have this really cool gradient coming from the outside towards the inside, which is exactly what we want. So we're just going to repeat this on all the other groups. So double tap on a layer, select, invert, feather, adjustment, hue, saturation, brightness. You crank up the brightness, crank up the saturation, and lower the hue, or move it towards the left, I should say, so it's a bit more yellow. Awesome. Next layer, select, invert. You feather it somewhere around 15. Oops. Hue, saturation, brightness. So I'm just going to speed it up a little bit so you don't have to watch the entire thing, but basically it's the same technique just on every single group. And see, now we have something that is really defined and is starting to look like a succulent. But it's still a bit flat. We don't have any shadows because, you know, this leaf would cast a shadow on this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. You know, you get the idea. So we're going to add shadows now. And to do that, we are going to create alpha lock on all of the separate layers that we have. And what alpha lock does is, I'll show you an example. To activate it, first of all, you just double tap on the layer again and click on alpha lock. And you'll see this checkered pattern that appears around the shape. And what it does is everything that you're going to color is going to stay within the shape that was drawn on the layer when you activated the alpha lock. So you won't have to erase everything or to really worry that you're staying within the line. You can just go crazy and it's going to look clean and really nice. So we're just going to apply alpha lock, like I was saying, on all the separate layers. And then we are going to select a nice darker green that is a bit blue, not fully blue, but just a bit more turquoise. And we're going to select the color shifting blotches brush or any soft brush that you have. We're just going to draw the shadows that would be cast from the upper levels of the leaves down on the lower levels of leaves. So what I was talking about, you know, this shadow, this leaf casting a shadow, that's what we're drawing now. So just go ahead and do that on all the layers really quickly. And you see, if you're trying to get a watercolor effect, this is the one step where you're going to see a lot of the textures coming through. And this step doesn't have to be precise at all. It's kind of cool having it look a bit splotchy and blotchy. And now here we're just going to draw some sort of a triangle in the middle, just like this. Awesome, this is starting to look really good. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to merge all the layers together except for the sketch layer. And to merge layers in Procreate, you just put your fingers and squish them together, which is kind of funny when you first start doing it. Sometimes it takes a little bit of practice. And we're also going to deactivate the alpha lock. This piece is looking good, but it's looking a bit flat. So we're going to add some color variation by using a technique that you probably know by now if you've watched my other tutorials. And the technique is using the selection tool to draw some sort of a fun squiggly shape over your piece and then feathering it somewhere between 20 and 30%. And using the adjustment panel, again, the hue, saturation, and brightness, changing the hue to something different. In this case, I'm changing it to a bit more blue. And you can play with the brightness and the saturation a little bit here, but not too much. The point is really just to shift the hue to get some color variation, just like you would get, well, first of all, in nature, but also if you were using watercolor, it would be different type of pigments that would kind of blend together. We're going to do it again, and this time we're going to shift it towards the yellow. So go ahead and draw a squiggly shape, feather it, hue, saturation, brightness, and shift it towards the yellow. In this case, if you're shifting towards the yellow, I suggest lifting up the brightness a little bit and lowering the saturation. Otherwise, you get some sort of a weird color that is either neon looking or brown, and that's not what we want. We just want a nice yellow. And you see now we have a lot of color variation in the piece. We are also going to use this technique to add a little bit of shadows and a little bit of light. So go ahead with the selection tool again and draw some sort of a half moon shape in the bottom. And feather it quite a lot this time. And with our trusty hue, saturation, and brightness tool here, just lower the brightness a little bit and shift the hue to a bit more blue. And you can play with the saturation too. And on the other side, kind of here on top, oops, create some sort of a circle or ellipse and feather it quite a lot too. And this time we're going to lift the brightness up, lower the saturation, and maybe make it more yellow, or maybe not actually. And now we feel like we have a lot of light coming in the piece. A few more key tips that are going to make this piece look so much more professional, but that are very simple tricks to do in Procreate, is we are going to add or to change the shape of the leaves a little bit by using the Liquify tool. And the Liquify tool, you can find it in the adjustment panel here too. It allows you to move the color that you have on your canvas around. You have a bunch of options. In this case, we're going to use the push option with a size around 22, and the other options you can play around is just for the feel of how you like to do it, but these two are the really important one to select. And what we are going to do is we're just going to drag out the points here, just slightly, nothing too crazy, but it's going to make the shape that you drew at first really quickly look more complex and more professional, like this piece was, it took you a long time to draw, but it actually is just, a few minutes. Make sure you're not missing any. I think that's it. So you see in a few seconds, you just did something that made a big difference. Now we are also going to add some lights, because we added some shadows and it looks good, but we want to do the opposite too. We want to add some lights. And to do that, we are going to use the eraser tool, but we're going to access the brush library. If you double click on the eraser, instead of just clicking on it once, you actually have access to all the different brush shapes that you have for your paintbrush, but instead of adding color, you're actually erasing color, which is really cool. So select the color shifting blotches again, and on each side, or on each sleeve I should say, gently erase a little bit, but on only one side of the leaf, and just going around like this on each leaf, but just one side. And again, it doesn't have to be precise. This is not a tutorial about precision at all. But you see it's adding just even more detail, and it makes it look so much more professional, and it just gives it a lot of depth and character. And then you're going to zoom in and lower the size a little bit. And you can reactivate your sketch layer, but stay on the main color layer here. You are going to just erase along the lines that you had in the middle a little bit. And if we hide back the sketch layer, we see that now the middle part has more definition than it did before. So we are almost done. We only have a few final touches to do, but stick around until the end because the final touches, in my opinion, are what makes or break the piece. If you've seen a lot of succulents, you probably have noticed that the edges of the leaves are quite often a different color than the middle of the leaf. And we're going to recreate this effect here, again by using the selection tool, and just quickly drawing a shape that includes the edges or the points of the leaves, of the outside leaves, just like that. And we are going to feather it around 20%. That's the magic number to remember. And we are going to invert it too. And going back to the hue, saturation, brightness panel, you're going to shift the hue quite a bit. So it's somewhere, something like a pink or orange color. You're going to lift up the brightness and lower the saturation a little bit. Now you see if you deselect, the edges of your leaves are just this really cool different color, which makes it look super realistic and also just makes it look, it makes it pop quite a lot. Speaking of making it pop, we are also going to play with the contrast a little bit more. So go ahead and select the curve option here. Basically what you have to know is this section here controls the dark colors in your piece, and this section here controls the lighter colors in your artwork. So if I want to add contrast, I want the lighter color to be lighter and I want the darker colors to be darker. And to do that, click here on the section here where you control the lighter colors, and you're going to lift it towards the top and click in the dark section and drag it towards the bottom. You can readjust it a little bit if it was too intense. And one thing you're going to note is doing that kind of makes your color look a bit neon sometimes. But it's really easy to correct. If you go to the adjustment, again, hue, saturation, brightness, our favorite tool, you can lower the saturation and you're going to get back to colors that look a bit more natural and not so crazy toxic kind of vibe. Okay. We're almost done. The last step, however, is my favorite step, and if you've watched any of my tutorials before, you know where I'm heading to. It is the salt brush. So go ahead and select the salt brush from the Ultimate Watercolor toolbox, and starting from the outside of your shape towards the inside, you are going to just add, that's too big of a brush, just going to drag along, and this is going to add, if you can see, some nice white speckles here on the piece, which makes it look super, super cool and just realistic, and adds even more depth and texture to everything. We are going to finish this piece using the splatters, so go ahead and select a nice bright green color as well as the splatter brush, and quickly just drag it along like this. And going back to your layer, you're going to click on this little N here, which is going to give you access to the blending modes, and this is an advanced feature, but for this time just go ahead and select linear burn, and you can play around with the opacity here if you want to change that. We would be done. If you want to tweak everything a bit more, you can. If you want to add some outlines to your leaves, you totally can do that too. If you go and check on the example that I did first, I added some outlines on here. On this one I added white outlines. On this one, I didn't at all, and it just looks more subdued and gentle and soft. So that's up to you. You can go ahead and add more outlines and really kind of give it more drawn look. Otherwise, you can just stop here, and have something that looks really, really cool. If you do use this tutorial to draw your own succulents, I would love to see the results. So please tag me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you have an idea for a tutorial you would like to see, it can be a technique or like a specific thing to draw just like this, comment below and I'll make sure to read it and probably add it to my list of ideas for tutorials to film soon. And if you're interested into the watercolor toolbox that I used today, I'll link it in the description below too, and I'll probably add a promo code. We'll see about that. Otherwise, I'll see you soon.